The term Church Fathers describes the men who led the Church in the first few centuries after the death of the Apostles. Everybody knows that Jesus entrusted the mission of preaching the gospel to his disciples, most of whom became missionaries, or apostles as we call them, after he ascended into heaven. The few exceptions to this pattern are also well known. Judas was disqualified from being an apostle because he betrayed Jesus and hanged himself in remorse. Saul of Tarsus, better known to us as Paul, was called to become an apostle later on, but he became one of the most successful evangelists and a prolific writer. His letters make up a substantial portion of the New Testament, which is the legacy of the apostles to us. Not all the New Testament writers were apostles, but the others worked in close association with them and transmitted their message. That explains why the writings of Mark, Luke, and the anonymous author of the Epistle to the Hebrews are included in the New Testament, but the writers are not regarded as church fathers in the usual sense. By AD 100, the apostles and their associates had passed away, and a new generation had taken over the leadership of the church. They carried on the teaching of the apostles, guarding it and interpreting it to the growing number of people who were becoming Christians. For the most part, these men were pastors and evangelists who had been born into church families, though there were also some converts from paganism who mastered their new faith well enough to be able to teach it to others. They did not call themselves fathers of the church and were unaware that they constituted a distinct group. They were just doing their job as the Holy Spirit directed them. Many of them were later recognized as saints because they were particularly successful at what they were doing, but some of them never made it that far. Either they fell afoul of the church after their deaths and were condemned as heretics, like Origen, or they were so obscure that they were never properly identified, like Ambrosiaster. But by the 17th century, the contributions of all the great teachers and writers of the early church, not just those of the so-called saints, were being recognized, so today these men are grouped together as church fathers, those who interpreted the Bible and formulated the main doctrines of Christianity as we know it today. They were not Catholic, Protestant, or Orthodox in the modern sense because they lived and worked before those divisions occurred. But all Christians today can see something of ourselves in them. We are their children, different from them in some ways, but dependent on them as our common ancestors in the faith.